Greetings and salutations to everybody out there in YouTube land. I'm your host once again, Dan Thornton. I want to thank you all for tuning into this special video, something we don't normally do as much anymore on Lions Talk Live. We try to focus more on just the morning show, 7 to 8 a.m. Every day of the week. But I wanted to dive into something and give you guys a little bit of food for thought. This is a story I originally wrote for the Detroit News back in the late 90s. Most of you are aware, outside of being a coach and a realtor, a YouTuber, obviously, I did work for the Associated Press in a number of Detroit and Kalamazoo area newspapers during the 90s, even the late 80s and early 2000s. So this is a story I've run before, but I thought in light of last night's game, I'd throw something at you guys again, see what your thoughts. Now, I don't remember all the information as well as I once did, so I did have to take some notes, and I'll be reading it to you guys a little bit. Any rate, so a lot of you probably, if you've been Lions fans for a while, you probably can't really think of times in the 70s or 80s or even the 90s where the Lions just got egregious call after egregious call, shaking your head, what's going on? But I do want to point out some things on you because, again, I did write this story before, and I want to iterate it to you. All right, so in 2006, Roger Goodell, as we all are aware, becomes a leader of the NFL, commissioner of the NFL, if you will. He's facing a league that is in growth, prosperity, and talking about expansion. At that time, Roger Goodell, wanting to make a quick impression upon the owners, talks about also ways to increase revenue. What happens real quickly under Goodell's watch, though, is the great economic recession of the 2008, 2009, etc. Goodell sees this as an opportunity to revitalize the NFL and bring in new revenue streams. One of the things he does real quick is he looks at games across the board and tries to understand ways he can bring in additional revenue and increase revenue during depressed times for the league. He identifies the NFL historical game of Thanksgiving Day game of the Detroit Lions and says, I'm going to make a motion out in meetings in March 22nd out in California for NFL owners to vote on a potential removing the Thanksgiving Day game from the Detroit Lions and making it a rotational game across the league, giving it every year to a new team to host. Goodell does not anticipate that the old guard of the NFL really stands behind the Fords and votes it down. This angers Goodell to the point where he contests it and openly admonishes the Detroit Lions for hosting it. As we all are aware, in the early 2000s, the Lions have not been very strong, and he views the NFL Thanksgiving Day traditional game for the Lions as a missed opportunity to increase revenues. The other part of it is during the 2008 and 9, as we're probably all aware, the Ford family does also reduce the amount of revenue they spend on advertising and media, etc., for the NFL, or I should say within the NFL. Because of that, the NFL, who's already hurting like everybody else for revenue, now takes a step back and reviews some things. We all know about last night's game. We all know about last year in the Seattle versus the Rams game, a number of calls that go against the Rams that could have benefited the Detroit Lions. I want you to take this into consideration, though. Let me read from the notes. As I've already talked about with the Great Recession that happened, the NFL losing some revenue from the Ford family. Now we go to our first real evidence that perhaps calls are egregiously happening against the Detroit Lions. You're all probably going to know this when I mention it, but the first evidence is September 12th, 2010. If you aren't aware of what this is, take a moment to pause and think about it. If you guessed Soldier Field and the Calvin Johnson process of the catch rule, you are correct. Calvin Johnson, as we all know, catches a pass that seems to be the game-winning touchdown score against the Bears late with just seconds left in the game. The officials on the field ruled this a touchdown. The officials in the booth upstairs at Soldier Field rule it a touchdown. We need to stop and consider that right there. The officials working the game and the ones in the review booth upstairs at the field rule it a touchdown. But a call comes in from the NFL offices saying he does not complete the process of the catch. The touchdown is waved off, and the Lions do not end up winning that game. This starts a roughly 14-year process of odd calls that have besieged the Detroit Lions time and time again. Now, we get another evidence of odd calls. We talked about the Rams versus Seattle game last year. Let's not forget the Golden Tate being ruled down, even though officials on the field ruled it a touchdown. Say he scored a touchdown, a call comes in from outside the stadium again, telling them no, Golden Tate, it does not score a touchdown. The Lions end up dropping that game. Now we also remember the Stephen Tulick a phantom face mask call late in a game that gives that team an additional down, and the Lions end up losing that game as well. All these instances, late game situation, Lions could have won the game, should have won the game, but a call comes in from outside the field, putting the Lions down and saying, nah, the Lions aren't getting the benefit of that call. Let's not also forget a moment in time when the replacement refs a couple years back were on the field, and despite the protests of Lions and the opposing players noticing, the Lions were flagged for a 15-yard personal foul. 15 yards, I think we all get on a personal foul. That's what the assessment is. A placement or replacement refs issue a 27-yard penalty against the Detroit Lions, and despite the noted objections from both teams about it, the NFL offices informed them to uphold the penalty, and again, leads to another Lions defeat. Let me keep on going down here. Ndamukong Suh, fan favorite of Detroit, against the Dallas of all teams, right? Gets issued for a personal foul, tackling a running back by his hair. His long hair, it's outside the helmet. It is legal to tackle somebody by their hair in this instance. And what unfortunately happens? The Lions give up a 15-yard penalty. It leads to a score. A tight game becomes a little bit less tight. And once again, the Lions are on the wrong side of the scoreboard. Don't forget the Titus Young in the Matt Flynn game. If you all watched Lions long enough, you remember at Green Bay, Lions have an opportunity to get into the playoffs. Titus Young is ruled on the field for an incomplete pass in the end zone. The touchdown net doesn't happen. Official replays shows he does complete the process of the catch, both feet down in bounds. And yet, once again, the officials kind of throw some shade at Detroit and say, yeah, we don't think it is a touchdown. And unfortunately, it's ruled incomplete. And I think we all know the outcome of that game. Then I kind of already brought it up, but 2014, the playoff game against the Dallas Cowboys, the Lions with a lead, driving late in the game, have an opportunity to pick up extra points, control the clock a little bit more, and really put the Dallas Cowboys out of the game. Matt Stafford drops back to pass, throws a pass to Brandon Pettigrew that I'm pretty sure if you see the thumbnail or if you're old enough to remember this, is initially waived as a personal foul, a pass interference penalty. The flag is picked up, but before the flag is picked up, Des Bryant goes onto the field without a helmet, gets in the face of one of the corresponding officials, and chews him out. This, by rules, should have also been a penalty. For whatever reason, calls come in to the officials from up above and tell them to pick up the flag, the pass interference flag, for whatever reason. It's never explained other than a post-game summary a couple days later where the NFL does agree that, yes, it probably should have been a pass interference. Sort of like with the Titus Young touchdown that was was ruled an incomplete pass, even though reviews show he completed the process of the catch and it's a touchdown. The NFL once again issues a statement days later saying, yes, they might have dropped the ball on that one. So the other part of this is since 2009, the NFL has tried 5 different times to remove the Thanksgiving Day game from the Ford family Detroit Lions franchise. Each time, other owners have shot it down. This has angered Goodell, I believe, exponentially because they believe it is an affront to his position of power within the league. Remember, he's been trying to assert himself since he took over. He obviously is the king boss at this point, but it does appear to me he does not consider the Detroit Lions one of his biggest fans. And time again, unlike any other franchise, the Lions are finding themselves on the wrong side of many of these questionable calls. Did you know, a study was conducted on this, and it has been a few years. I want to say it was 2021, where the Lions have endured 3 times the amount of odd or questionable calls over any other team in the NFL. Let that sink in. In a day and age when the NFL is under fire for not the greatest officiating, you've got a 14-year window of odd officiating affecting one team 3 times the norm of any other team. That really needs to stand out and say something. I'm not going to tell you guys what to do to make of this. I'm not going to say, hey, there's a conspiracy. I'm just here to be a reporter, something I've done since the late 80s. And I will tell you this, when something is odd enough over a long enough stretch of time, it's probably intentional. The chances of random odd calls happening over and over again against one particular franchise at 3 times the norm of the NFL standard, that's a telling statement. And I'm sure there's other ones I haven't even considered in this report to you guys. There's probably other evidences of odd calls that I'm not thinking of. You guys, maybe in the comment section below, probably understand that. If you got some, go ahead and throw them at me. I'll take a second or two and go through the stream here. A real deal prime. Dak continues his dominance versus Lions 5-0 now. Okay, we'll go with that. Matthew, TJ Lang was talking this morning. Ref said on mic, number 70 eligible. The reason late flag was booth review heard 70 eligible, then called down. Why 68 caught the ball? They said 70. Yeah, I know it was pointed out by ESPN that the flag even comes in, I believe it's like 15, 16 seconds after the play. So the one thing I will say about last night's play is if you know anything about the rule book, all you have to do if you're reporting as eligible is swipe across your jersey or your uniform. It's a nonverbal communication that you can see in the replay. Taylor Decker does do. I get they're saying the official Allen is, even though Decker is only a couple feet from him, doesn't see it and apparently hear it. The problem I have with that is this. Officials pre-game go into both teams' locker rooms. They're going to go through ad nauseum with both coaching staffs as far as any nuanced plays, odd formations, things that maybe they don't see normally. Because let's be real, the league doesn't want the officials to look bad. So this officiating crew was aware of this play and any other odd formations plays the Lions potentially thought they would run. They had the heads up going into this play. That's issue one I have with it. Issue two, you can clearly see Decker swipe across his uniform. So even if you can't hear him, you're 2 to 3 feet away from the player. You should be able to see the swipe then. The fact that you didn't hear it or see it, should you really be officiating then? Your hearing and eyes are that bad. And before the game, where there's no pressure on you, you were informed of this play in formation. It's kind of egregious. You also have the other factor of look across the line of scrimmage. That's the only player who's lined up in an eligible position to go out and catch a pass. So you've got a lot of odd things that all have to come into play for that flag to fly. All right, Southwest Line, this is not complicated. The video evidence is clear. The ref is a liar. I would agree. And I would say this, we're real close to the playoffs. The other part that isn't being talked about a lot is how much other teams are upset about this. That play call or the error in the play call is going to affect a number of other teams as far as playoff positioning. Let's also understand how much money that's going to affect other teams. Difference between making the playoffs, not making the playoffs, hosting a playoff game versus going on the road. I think we all get those $40 beers or hot dogs takes a lot out of a stadium if they're not receiving a playoff game where they would have if the Lions would have won. I'm sure there'll be teams like bemoaning the fact that Minnesota is probably going to be given a quote unquote a win next week because Detroit's probably going to treat it like a bye. I think we can all see the trickle down effect from that. From the last night's call. JP, that was a rough mistake. Also, number 70 was at guard and never eligible. Yeah, and that's kind of what I was just pointing out there. Plus, you see where St. Brown lines up in correlation to Decker. Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a legal formation. He had enough guys on the line of scrimmage, plus the formation. Yeah, it was a big mess up. This ref is claiming Decker said that Skipper is eligible. So why in the hell he would do it? My problem with it, like I pointed out, if you misheard him, that doesn't negate the visual confirmation Decker gives you of the swipe across the chest, reporting himself as eligible. So again, Allen makes some mistakes here. He can't see the swipe, even though it's in front of him, and apparently he can't hear. The chances of that happening are pretty rare, I'm going to say. One pride, yes. So I'm not going to keep going on with this. I just wanted to give you guys a kind of a rehash of a story I wrote long ago and then redid in video format on YouTube last year. So take of it what you want, think of what you want, But I will say this, to me, you do a deep dive as an investigative journalist into stories. You start uncovering things. You've got the fact that Goodell takes over in 2006. You got the 2008 financial crisis where Goodell is trying to find ways to make more money for the league. And he tries to take the game away several times from the Detroit Lions, the Thanksgiving Day game away. The Lions object to it, get enough support from throughout the ownership of the NFL to contest them. The first time Goodell really kind of experiences maybe he is in complete control of things. And yes, at that point, odd calls seem to reign in fairly regularly against one particular franchise at a 3 times the NFL average, and that's the Detroit Lions on the wrong side of that. Make of it as you will. Let me know your thoughts. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here, but I hope you all have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow morning on the next Lions Talk Live. Take care, everybody.